Hi, welcome back to another episode of Chris Dyer's Creative Friends, the super awesome podcast show where me, your artist friend Chris Dyer, talks to all his beautiful creative friends. Today I am talking to my friend Ien Cohen, who's a director from New York who just made a beautiful movie called Humanity Stoked that I am in, along so many epic people that you will find out, including Tony Hawk, Neil deGrasse Tyson, tons of pro skaters and beautiful people all talking about, our wounds as humanity and how to overcome them as to make the world a better place. This is going to be a beautiful 2-hour conversation with a beautiful human being who's done a beautiful project. You want to sit through this one. So enjoy!
While the world is burning, got to make amends. Walk on the sunny side with a positive lens. Talks about passion between a women and a man. Chris Dyer and his creative friends. Darling, ooh, ooh,
Michael, thank you for being here in my lovely living room.
Thank you for having me, Sir Chris.
Yeah,
It's an honor.
Hell yeah, man. Are you well rested?
I am well rested. As you know, just got back from a big screening with Wavescape in South Africa, in Cape Town.
Yeah.
So big 16-hour flight to Atlanta and then down here. But
How was that?
It was amazing. Super restful accommodations. I'm staying with Chris at his beautiful place here, and super cool. So I'm grateful.
Yeah.
And, I'm well rested.
Well, when I got this place, I was like, I need a solid guest room, and then this
Yeah.
place had like a guest apartment, you
Yeah.
know, like just a humble room with its own bathroom, separate from the house. Then you get to just like, have your own private spot and rest well. So I'm happy it's getting used because usually I just have it empty.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. How was South Africa?
South Africa was a really special experience. My whole life for 5 years have been one special experience after another since Humanity Stoked began production. But yes, South Africa is a beautiful country. The people are super friendly, and the areas of Cape Town that I was in was huge surfing community, skating community. I went e-foiling in this beautiful Hout Bay where there were dolphins kind of frolicking. Like the water's ice cold. There's beaches right near me that are covered with penguins. So it's very deceiving. You look out and it looks very tropical and the water's aqua blue, but it's ice cold. You definitely need a wetsuit. But the festival was Wavescape, and the main sponsor of that festival is Band South Africa.
Oh, wow.
I was treated like family. And everyone in that Wavescape festival, in particular Steve Shooter and Shawnee and Spike, who started it, all great people. So just friends for life now. So yeah, great, wonderful experience.
So cool.
And now here with Mr. Chris Dyer for the Sarasota Film Festival.
We're in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Yeah.
That's where I live. And your next stop is Sarasota, which is like an hour away.
Yeah.
How is this tour for your movie?
It's kind of funny. I never really thought of it that way. As I travel the world, I just came back from Germany, and yeah, I guess I'm sort of on tour.
Yeah. You're like a rock star, man.
I don't know about that, but I can't control your perception of me.
How long has it been since your movie started touring the film festivals?
It's been just over a year, almost to the week, with our premiere in Tampere, Finland, which is another amazing experience. Came back from Tampere, Finland, and I'm very grateful because they paid for us, flew us out in conjunction with the U.S. Embassy in Finland, and an amazing experience. Also, huge skate community in Finland, a massive skate community. Also super friendly. Also treated us like family. I went out there with myself and Ian Gibson, the DP for the second half of the project, who became our editor and our colorist. And I actually, I'm going to put the word gave in quotes. I gave Ien a co-writing credit. I put it in quotes because it wasn't a gift. You know, when you're editing a documentary of this size, even though I conceived of the film years before I met him and was in production for a year before I even met Ien, as you're editing a doc, you're kind of tweaking and retweaking and creating the narratives as you go along. And so I feel strongly that an editor of a doc, especially of this nature, deserves a co-writing credit.
Right.
You know, for years I'll just keep tweaking the narrative and trying things and tweaking things. And so I've been blessed to have Ien on the team.
Shout
And
outs to
my first
Ien.
DP, Nick Lang, who's also an amazing friend and a great DP.
Nice. So in this year of touring and doing film festivals, where a movie gets seen, chopped around, you feel out the vibe of a public, you've already won how many awards? 12?
Yeah, we just won our 12th film festival, and the 12th was a unique win for us because it was all of our wins have been for like best feature-length documentary, and either most of them were jury prizes. In New York, we actually won the jury prize for best doc and the audience favorite award, so that was a really special experience. But the 12th was a win for best director, which just I did not expect that. That really blew me away. I'm just very humbling. As weird as it is to say, you think, oh well, you know, that'll just inflate your ego. It's strange how that works, but just really grounding for me to receive that.
Well, congrats.
Thank you.
And I hope that as you make your way back home to New York, that you feel proud of this year of touring and sharing this soul expression of yours. So tell me about this soul expression of yours. Humanity Stoked. What is that?
Yeah, sure. I will say this, just getting back to the other thing, just we've made the official selection of, I think, about 35 film festivals around the world.
Okay.
Obviously, I couldn't attend all of them, but I attend the ones I can, and 12 wins so far, I think, in 7 countries. So, and we'll be in this film festival circuit probably through June or maybe July. Hope to announce a big distribution deal by the end of this cycle. That's the goal. But so what's Humanity Stoked is a great question. Humanity Stoked, feature-length doc that I'm honored to have you a part of, as I'm honored to have you as a dear friend.
I feel like a movie star now, man.
You not feel like you are, sir. You are. Own it.
Yeah, I got the least lines, but that's okay because that way there's less room for me to put my foot in my mouth.
So yeah, it's something we're all accustomed to do once in a while. But as I said to you, and it's amazing because you'll be at the screening tonight. You'll see the film for the first time.
I can't wait to see it. Like I can't believe we're doing this interview and I haven't even seen the movie.
Yeah, it you don't have a lot of speaking lines, but you are in one of the most, if not the most, emotional sequences of the film, and you have a lot of screen time. And you do have some speaking, so it's you have a unique spot in the film, which you'll see. I don't want to give away too much.
People will be like, "What's his accent?" But so what's the movie about? When you invited me, I thought the movie was about skateboarders who make the world a better place. Is it still about that?
Nope.
Okay.
So you thought that because I told you that, and then so what
and
happened?
You lied to me.
I did. I lied. I'm a real liar. So yeah, in 2017, in the middle of 17, I reached out to you. And at the time, I thought that's what the film would be about. I would go around the world and interview people involved with skateboarding that are just spreading some goodness, doing good things, change makers in a positive way. And the film changed completely, and I'm glad it did. It's a very poignant reason why, as you know, we'll get into. But I don't know that film would have been particularly interesting to a large group of people, but due to a tragedy which you know about that really canceled our trip to Cuba where we first started filming, and then interviewing Rene Lecour in Cuba about what happened and how Amigo Skate, his charity in Cuba, got started, impacted me on a very visceral level. Extremely emotional situation, and I won't really give it away, so I won't talk about what it is. People will see the film and they'll see it. But when I came away flying back from Cuba in January of 18, after having filmed with you and Arturo O'Farrell and Chuck Treese and Rene LaCour and all of the kids of Havana, the skaters there, I realized that the film that I was making, Humanity Stoked, I needed it to be something very different. And what it became, as of that kind of epiphany on that flight, was a film primarily about understanding fear and how we allow fear to guide our hands, how we allow fear to affect our perception of reality, how it affects our ability to think critically and make decisions for our own lives, and really limit what we do with our own lives, limits our ability to build a life that's purposeful and that's satisfying, so we can live with contentment. And it is about many human challenges that are ramifications of fear, from all types of xenophobia, homophobia, racial inequality, gender inequality, depression, addiction, what we're teaching children, the education system, the importance of art, which is a dear subject to you, and music, which is another form of art in public education. And even it's hard for people to sometimes understand how some of the environmental damage we're doing is a result of fear, but it absolutely is to a very large extent. We explore that in the film, and so it became a film about these human issues.
Right.
And the cast is about 75 of the world's most iconic professional skateboarders, scientists, artists, musicians, activists, all of whom share a love of skateboarding and humanity. But the film is not directly about skateboarding. There's plenty of skating, B-roll in the film, but it is about these human issues and how we have the ability, whether we realize it or not, to positively impact our own lives and positively impact the lives of people all around us, from a community scale all the way up to a global scale.
Super beautiful. But it seems like it is still a movie about skateboarders making the world a better place. The only thing that you shifted is that instead of like a very linear, here's Tony Hawk and his foundation helping these kids.
Right.
It's more about like, why is Tony Hawk helping his kids? What is his trauma? So you're almost like addressing the trauma, the fear. Why we have fears? Because we got traumas. So it's like, hey, everybody, may you be the coolest skater in the world or whatever, the coolest person on top of a pedestal. We all have traumas. We are all vulnerable. And we got to address this root of the problem that creates all the issues of the world to become healers as opposed to become further traumatizers.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And we're really not really talking at all, other than initially in Cuba, in Act 1 of the film, as it transitions to Act 2, we do talk about Rene LaCour's and Kaya LaCour's charity, Amigo Skate. But that's really the last time, even though many of the people in the cast are involved in charitable organizations, some of them have their own, we don't talk about it really at all. We're just talking about people's personal experiences with these human issues as they are relatable to everyone. I don't care who you are. I don't care what gender you are. I don't care how you identify yourself. I don't care what age you are, what color you are, what religion you subscribe to, if at all. If you are a human being on Earth and you come to this film, there will be things in it that are relatable, that will resonate with you, and very likely at some points in the film quite deeply in a meaningful way. And so, I realized coming out of Cuba that I can make a doc about anything. Anyone can make a doc about anything. But even if you make a doc about a subject people care about, I don't care how well you make the doc. If it's not going to resonate with someone on a visceral level, it's just another hour and a half of your time, sitting in
Right.
front of a tube. So yeah, to try and make a film that resonates with people deeply was really what I tried to do. That's the only way to move people. That's
Right.
the only way to really connect with people is if you can get to them on that visceral, emotional level.
Right, because once again, you stop making the movie about the what are they doing, and you turn the movie into why are they kind people, and the what are they doing? It's interesting. Okay, they got a charity or they're
Right, right.
philanthropists, and that is another reason to put these mega stars on pedestals. Like, oh, not only they're
Yeah.
huge, but they're kind. Wow,
Yeah.
more reasons to adulate them. But instead, they're saying like, no, the why is because I feel like shit, and
Yeah.
everybody feels like shit to some degree. Like even the coolest person in the world has a wound,
Yeah.
and probably the biggest people in the world, they got big wounds that they haven't even addressed, but because they've been too busy being the shit, which probably even makes the wound worse because the whole world puts you in a pedestal, and inside you don't feel like worthy of it.
Yeah.
So you feel like an imposter. So I think this movie is important. May it be about skateboarders or not, but actually, skateboarders are supposed to be these like super cool, tough, perfect people. So for them to be all like, actually, no, we're all really just a bunch of losers with wounds, and here we are, making ourselves vulnerable. Damn, like that's like almost like the opposite of what skaters do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I have personally gone through like an explosive period of personal growth. One of the things that were key in that happening is accepting my own vulnerability, and I'm so grateful for this cast of 70 or 75 people for having just met me. I didn't know when I started this film. I had never met a pro skater, even though I've been a skateboarder since I was I don't know, 7 years old. I mean, I was a skater my whole life, but to have people trust me enough to accept their own vulnerability in an interview, I'm so grateful for, because people do have these expectations or these preconceived notions of people, and I've been asked often, who surprised you most during the interview, and I could tell you, nobody, because I tried so hard not to have any expectations about who someone was, what they were about, what their experiences were, what their perspectives were, because I know from my own experience and just being educated that when you have preconceived notions of people, when you have expectations of people, you tend to project that upon them. It would affect the questions I asked, it would affect the conversations we had, and I didn't want to do that. I wasn't there to get something specific out of someone. I wanted to sit down with each person and have just a open, honest, vulnerable conversation. I knew it would make editing an extremely daunting task, because I would be left with, say, we did a total of 110 interviews. Each was generally over an hour long, some much longer. So we would end up with many hundreds of hours of footage. I would have the ability to pull and create so much in terms of the narrative, although I just knew it would be a really difficult challenge to do, but I would have the most flexibility to create the most honest and compelling film. And that's what I did. A lot of times during the interview, things became emotional. Sometimes I was emotional. I'm breaking down in an interview, and, looking back, it probably was beneficial in that, if people see that I'm okay with being vulnerable in a conversation, then maybe they feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit safer being vulnerable themselves.
Right.
And so, but the beautiful thing is, the important thing is that virtually every Q&A, every live talk I've done after a screening at a film festival, there are multiple people that come to me at the Q&A in the theater, maybe like at a a place in town later. They may catch me even on the street, or just slide into my DMs, in the following days, that are in tears. People just come up and literally just give me a hug, or want a hug, and letting me know that they're so grateful because something in the film made them feel okay with accepting some part of themselves and talking about it. And for someone who may have a hero in the film, whether it's Tony Hawk or Lissie Armanto or anyone, to see that they too have had these struggles, and especially in certain parts of the United States and in other countries where, other countries means other cultures, and in many places it's still really difficult for men in particular to be okay with having feelings without being told that it's emasculating, as if that's bad anyway, and that they have such guard up. And for them to be able to see that it's okay for their heroes, their masculine heroes, for example, as they see masculinity and what that means to them, to see them okay, breaking down and being okay, then it makes it okay for them. It's sad that they need to see that to accept themselves, all of the parts of themselves, but if that's what it takes, then it's an honor for me to be able to provide that catalyst for them to accept themselves a little bit more and be open a little bit more with themselves and with people in their lives. So that's a great honor for me,
Beautiful. As an artist, I resonate a lot with what you're saying and what you're doing, because as an artist, I try to be very honest and vulnerable, and that's where I've been able to connect with my audience the most. Like, as an artist, I can put my image of like, look how cool I am, look all these cool things that I do. But what really grabs people's attention is the days where I'm like, you know what, guys, I feel bad today, I feel stressed out.
Yeah.
I live in a paradise, yet still I can be unhappy, and how can I deal with that? And then people who might put me on a pedestal might be like, oh shit, like Chris is a human like myself.
Yeah.
What a great gift. So what you're doing with your movie is you're giving 77 people all making themselves vulnerable, and that perhaps came out of your own resonance and your own ability to be vulnerable. You've created a platform or a place, or you're holding space for these super cool people who spend their whole life to show how cool they are in their insecurity, perhaps, to actually drop down their guards and be vulnerable. And that's such a huge gift. If everybody could just kind of like drop the whole like, hey, I'm cool, please accept me kind of vibe, and just be like, hey, I'm cool, sure, I love myself, but I don't need your validation to make me cool. I can be comfortable with myself, to know that I'm cool, even though I'm also like a broken human being that's working to repair.
Yeah, 100%. I think what you're talking about is, unfortunately, this kind of mutual exclusivity people feel about things and about themselves. I'm either this cool person that has my shit together and I've got no fucking problems and I'm fucking great, or I'm this, pathetic, not where I want to be loser. And that's not how things are. They're not that simplistic, and it's certainly not how people are. People are complex. They have complex lives. They have complex array of feelings and emotions, and you could be both, sometimes multiple times on the same day.
Right.
And that's okay. And I think the world would be a better place if more people are more comfortable with themselves,
right,
good or bad, and to give themselves the space to just be who they are without trying so hard to protect themselves, trying so hard to be something. It's when you let go of that, I found, it's just extremely liberating,
right,
to just let go sometimes and accept yourself, with all your flaws. And some days it's easier to do than others, but I do know that once you start letting go, once you start just letting that weight fall off you, it becomes more second nature, and you're a healthier person for it, mentally, physically, emotionally, depending upon how spiritual you are, spiritually as well. You become a healthier person, and you become a happier person.
So this movie is kind of like going to the psychologist in a way, or you became the psychologist to all the characters in the movie, and by people observing that process, it helps with their own psychological process of accepting themselves with their ups and their downs and letting themselves be. And I find if we can all just kind of like calm down a little bit, not have to conquer over anybody in order to feel good enough, and just like, I accept myself, I accept you, we all accept them. No one has to push each other to be like myself in order for me to feel okay. I think the world would be a lot better, especially on the political side. All these politicians are just a bunch of like insecure, human, broken beings that are trying to find this acceptance of their power or their comfort. And if they were just balanced human beings, they would go out there and be like, hey, I accept myself, I accept you, let's go out and make everybody feel good and loved and make
Yeah.
sure everybody has what they need.
Yeah.
That would be a way better world. But it starts with the humans at the bottom, and may that medicine spread.
Yeah, completely. And you mentioned something too about psychology and being a psychologist for people. I'm glad the film can help people open up. I am a big advocate for being okay and seeking professional help. Talking to anyone is helpful, it's cathartic, and sometimes when you're talking to someone, whether it's a professional or a friend, a loved one, whatever, sometimes just the process of speaking helps you really understand yourself better. But yeah, in terms of professional help, a huge advocate for it. 5 years ago, before I started the film, and coming in out of 2017, I was in like a terrible depression, and I don't know, how much longer I would have been in it than I was if I did not seek professional help and get to a therapist on a weekly basis and have my sessions and get to talk and help myself work through these problems with a professional is just super helpful. And as I travel the world at these festivals, because one of the segments in the film deals with mental health, deals with depression, deals with suicide, deals with self-harm, and in a lot of places in the United States and certainly around the world, there's still a lot of shame involved in acknowledging that you need help, professional help, whether it's medication or whether it's just talk therapy, whatever it is, yes. And again, especially it's worse for men in many cultures. It's what's okay for a woman to do, and as it's perceived by men, it's not okay for men to do, because that, like I said, is if it's this horrible thing, that's quote unquote emasculating, whatever that may mean to them. That's not something that a man should do. That's a how should I say? It's seen as like a weakness, and
Right.
that's just a fucking shame.
That's
pathetic.
It's a fucking situation, dude, because like, say, I grew up in Latin America.
Right.
And Latin America has those walls of what a man should be
Right.
way thicker. And if you dare to break out of that, it's kind of like, you can be ostracized by society itself if
Yeah.
you break out of that box of what a man's supposed to be. And it's hard because you can leave your country and go to a new country where things are chiller, but still that's so ingrained in your brain by like your family and your friends, and it takes a lot of work to get out of it and really accept yourself in whatever place of the range of who you are.
Yeah.
As for going to talk therapy, a psychologist, psychotherapist. I used to go as a kid, as a 5-year-old, because I was a fucking, tornado of a kid, and my parents would take me to these people, and they try to fix me, and they couldn't, and I had a bad relationship with that. I think they tried again as a teenager, because like they just couldn't figure out why I was so wild. And I never really went back to that style of healing.
Right.
Because I got great friends, I got great partners, I got very wise friends that I can have very deep conversations, and I'm very much a big communicator. I always share my feelings. I'm very honest, and and I can find my healing through talking to my friends.
Right.
But this year, I had an Instagram contact, Melissa, the spiritual misfit, and she's like, hey, will you accept this gift of, doing coaching or therapy with me? And at the beginning, I was like, well, I've been doing my therapy through like ayahuasca and plant medicine. That's my psychologist. It's interdimensional, higher being that comes and like reflects to me all my ways and how to improve, and then I learned through that. But I was like, so there was a pride in me like, oh, I don't need another human to tell me how to be better. Like, I should know how to be better. And then I was like, Chris, put your guard down, try it out.
Yeah.
And I've been doing these weekly conversations with her, and she's very lovely. And really, at the end of the day, she just makes really great questions that I have to be the one answering and finding the answers. And great reflections too, like, have you seen it from this perspective? So it's been very helpful too, and it does carry on to my life. Like sometimes I'll have a situation and then like, oh yeah, she told me that when negative thoughts come into my brain, maybe I should like write them down and observe them and see, you know, where it's coming from, if it has any value, if it's, you know, if it's bullshit, and if I can just dispose of them. So it's been very helpful.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. And I hope that area does their work, and I hope that this movie stimulates people to go out and do their work.
Yeah.
So thank you for this.
Yeah, no, yeah, thank you. You're welcome. One thing you said reminded me of something that one of the people in the cast said. A dear friend of mine, someone who became many of the cast members. I'm fortunate to have become dear friends with in the years since it began. Yourself, one of them. The one I'm talking about now is Brian Anderson. And in the film, he talks about the value of having to be honest with yourself, because you could go to all the therapy you want. You can go see a psychotherapist 5 days a week for 2 hours a day, but if you're not going to really not just honest with yourself, I mean brutally honest with yourself, you're wasting your time, the therapist's time, you're wasting your money. You're just not going to, you have to dig down. That's the only way for it to be effective. And depending upon what the issues are, inside you, will determine how deep you have to dig. Because there's a lot of people in this world that are on a path. They're not even sure why they're on a path. They're working so hard, whether it's they think they want to make more money, or they need this bigger house, or they working hard at a profession. It's not even making them happy. Like I'm sure all of us know someone that may be a lawyer or whatever, or they're in corporate law, or they're in business, or doing something with their life, and like they're just not happy, and they question whether they've made a terrible career path choice. And sometimes, you start on a path when you're young or at any age, and the longer I find that someone's on a path, the more difficult it is, or the less likely it is for them to then question it. Because if you're doing something you have invested 12 years of your life in, for you to change course and course correct, even though from that point forward you're going to be better, you're going to be happier, you have to at some point acknowledge to yourself, even if it's indirectly, that you've made a mistake, and that you may have, quote unquote, wasted the last 12 years of your life, even though it's not that simple. We're not one dimensional. And no one wants to admit that they've, quote unquote, wasted, even if that's just a false perception. They don't want to admit that they were misguided for so long. And so it also requires you to accept the fact that you're imperfect and you make mistakes. And sometimes you make big, lasting mistakes. But it's like, what are you going to do? Just keep putting, investing time in that mistake, and the longer you do it, the less likely it is you're gonna course correct. So I encourage people so much to really be okay with just saying, just fucking stop what you're doing, just long enough to think about it with an open mind. But in order to do that, getting back to some of the things that the film is about, having to do with fear, you have to let go of fear, because you mentioned like being ostracized before, and that's a big fear. And I think it's helpful to understand that it's not just an insecurity that makes people afraid of being ostracized or embarrassed or humiliated. This is a result of hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary biology. We are the descendants of frightened fucking people. Many years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago, there were beings, humans, not current humans, but primitive primitive humans. Neanderthals being one of many, in the line of humans. But there were people that weren't afraid of being ostracized. They weren't afraid of freezing to death or starving to death or being mauled to death. What those people did was froze to death. They were mauled to death. They starved to death. What they didn't do generally was live long enough to reproduce and pass on their DNA. The people that, especially back then, hundreds of thousands of years ago, going alone was like a death sentence. You needed to be involved in your tribe. That's how this tribal mentality began. We evolved with the tribal mentality. The people that stuck together and worked as a team they survived. They passed on their DNA to us, and so we are programmed genetically to be afraid and not want to be ostracized. And when you understand that, it's easier to say, okay, I can now hack this system. These are fears that are ingrained in me through evolutionary biology, but they're not applicable anymore. But we're still programmed. So now, even though now getting ostracized just means maybe we're going to be embarrassed, or maybe we'll have to lose some friends, or we'll have to make some new ones, but it's still this really visceral fear. And the example that I use to help people understand how real this is the common fear of public speaking. Many people, most perhaps, are afraid of public speaking. If you have ever, if anyone is listening to this podcast and have had to do some public speaking, you will recognize this because it's so funny to me. You're about to go up on stage, there's a big podium, there's dozens, maybe hundreds of people in the audience, and even though you know, worst case scenario, there's no jeopardy. You're not going to be harmed. You're going to be fine. You'll get in your car after with your air conditioning and whatever. You'll go home to a fridge full of food. You'll be fine. There's no jeopardy. But yet, as you walk up, it's literally like you're facing a tiger. Your heart is pounding. You're sweating. This is the irrational fear, the irrational physiological reaction you're having. That's a result of evolution. We were evolved to have that fear of being ostracized because it could be a death sentence back then.
Because you get kicked out of the tribe if you're not making the cut.
Yep, and then see how you make it alone. See how you're going to hunt and survive and protect yourself without the help of your tribe. And so, yeah, that's a really good example. Think about how your body, your blood pressure, you're pounding, you're sweating, even though you're not actually in danger. And that helps people understand how real this evolutionary biological process is and how that affects us now. So it's interesting, but we have to be smarter and allow the knowledge of that to help us get past those fears, and then we could move forward in directions that we would otherwise never have the courage to do. You know?
Right. Wow, that's so interesting. Yeah, definitely none of us want to be kicked out of the tribe. In our case, we're skateboarders, and there's so many ways to be the wrong kind of skateboarder. In the case of Brian Anderson, a gay skateboarder, you didn't see many. My friend Josh Love, who I used to sponsor through Creation Skateboards, he recently came out about his boyfriend, and I was like, wow, that's so beautiful that more pro skaters can now go out there and show who they are without any fear. I love how the world's evolving and being more accepting one step at a time, you know?
Right.
And to reflect what you were saying, like, sure, you could be living the wrong life, being a lawyer or a politician instead of a writer or an artist. But even if you do choose to be an artist, you could be, or an artistic person, you could be doing it from the wrong intention. You could be like, oh, I'm going to be a musician and an artist because I want to trick people to like me, and then I can find the love for myself through their love, instead of doing it at like, this is just who I am and I'm going to share my love to feed the world. Instead, you're doing like some kind of like trick to find the love instead of just loving yourself for who you are.
Yeah, that's it's true. It's a trap. You know, you can get caught up in wanting the adulation and the acceptance, not, because that just makes you feel good. That feeds your ego, and that's always a trap. No matter what you do, that's a trap, and it's something I'm aware of. I mean, I try so hard not to have ego, but look, I'm a human being. To say I have no ego, that's fucking ridiculous. But to the contrary, it means I have to be more mindful of it and make sure that when I feel like I'm driven into a certain direction, I want to do something, that I try and look at it and say, what's my motivation? Is this because, this is some type of ego boost, or is this because this is going to serve some purpose that's beyond myself, that'll provide some goodness or inspire some people? Right. And sometimes both are in the mix. Yeah. It's like you have to be honest with ourselves, and so to just try and keep some balance. Like everything in life, balance is generally important. Moderation is important.
Yeah, it's tricky because, say, in positions like being an artist or a skateboarder, you still got to make your cool points, because that's what makes your business work out.
Yeah.
If you're not cool in the eyes of the world, or at least cool enough to, to bring some kind of revenue so you can pay your bills and continue doing your thing, that's no good neither. You still got to keep it up, but you got to make sure you don't fall in the trap that, oh, if I do this, people think I'm cool, and then I'll feel good about myself. You can be like, hey, I feel good about myself, but I'll still show my cool things so I can keep on doing this and make people happy in the end.
The danger is, it's like there's always shortcuts in life, and there's a price you pay for them sometimes. They're not so obvious, but feeling good about yourself through, public adulation is a shortcut, but it's not real. So the second it ends, you're suddenly craving more of it. It's like a never-ending thing. And when you find, if you could feel good about yourself because of who you are, you're not subject to those highs and lows, and you have a more balanced kind of a position that you're coming from.
Right.
And there are guys in the film that talk about that, like Tony Alva, also went through a period of explosive growth, and he self-admittedly was like an egotistical ass. He talks about it all the time, that he's the ego. He said in the film, as he said plenty of times, like, ego was running his life, and he was just arrogant, and he just wanted to be the coolest thing. He wanted everyone to think he was the coolest thing, but it's not sustainably fulfilling, and it's not healthy.
And it can turn in a second too. Like, as much as people put you on a pedestal and you're the coolest guy one day, you can make a mistake, and the next day Eric can just hate you, and then you gotta be like, I'm still the same person. Do I deserve to be loved as, the coolest guy, or hated like the worst guy?
Right.
At the end of the day, you still live inside yourself, and you're the one who should judge where you're at in your process.
Yeah. And because when you go to sleep at night, your quote unquote fans, or whoever your followers, or whatever your shit is, they're not there with you. You got to wake up in the middle of the night, and you're there with yourself. And if you don't, create a version of yourself that's authentic and worthy of love from yourself, you're constantly going to be chasing it from others, and that's going to really guide your hand. That's going to set your path. And who wants to be chasing that shallow sense of satisfaction and sense of self?
Yeah.
It's just
but so many of us do. And especially in this era of social media, phones, likes, instant gratification, anybody can all of a sudden be a famous person for any random activity. And then they're chasing that, like, oh, where's the people liking me? Where's the people liking me? So it's almost like back in the day, it was only a few selected people who really shined.
Right.
They became famous. They were public, and then they had to deal with the ups and downs of being a public person, the psychological traps, the love, the hate, the growth. Now almost like every person has a chance to go through that if they have something to offer, even if it's just for their group of friends.
Yeah.
So,
I struggle with that now, because like, I never wanted to be on social media, and I personally am not on social media because I knew that was not going to be healthy for me. But I have to have a big presence on social media now, and I encourage people to follow us. It's the film account, on Instagram. We're on Facebook too, but I mean, mostly our focus is on Instagram. And I encourage people to follow us at Humanity Stoked, because that's my job, is to promote this film. I made the film for it to be seen, and one of the key elements in having that happen and getting a great distribution deal and getting recognition, which is important if we're seeking distribution, is to have a strong social media following. So I'm grateful. We have a little under 15,000 followers now, which is organic, which is not a lot compared to, say, someone like yourself and other cast members that have hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of followers. But it's astonishing to me that we do, because we're a non-profit documentary that's not even out yet. How close to 15,000 people follow us is like astonishing to me. But it's like, if I didn't have the film, I probably wouldn't be on social media at all, because I see the toll it takes, the time it takes, and the Humanity Stoked posts that I make, for the most part, I try to make meaningful posts that are inspiring to people, that are some of them are, we're trying to do some fun posts too and stuff. It's important not to take yourself seriously like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I try and make the post meaningful, when I can. And I have ambivalent feelings about social media. There's so much in this world that is wonderful because of social media. But at the end of the day, if I were to think about what's the ultimate price society pays for social media and what are the advantages and the benefits of it, the disadvantages overwhelm the advantages. And I see the damage it does to people's self-esteem, especially young girls, but it's not specific to gender. It's young guys too, people of any gender identification. Everyone, you could end up feeling inadequate for any number of reasons, whether it's your physical appearance, your intelligence, how deep you are, how clever you are, how funny you are. It's like you could...
How advanced you are in your career, how good your art is. It's a fucking... It's a mind fuck.
Yeah, you're talking about keeping up with the Joneses. It's like, there's the platform fucking for it. And the powers that be at, say, Meta, for example, that, control a lot of the social media accounts, their algorithms are very, very clever. They're very advanced at knowing how to game you emotionally and how to keep you coming back for more and finding that sweet spot where you are literally a fucking pawn for them.
People coming for more, maybe you good or not.
Yeah, you are if you are on Facebook, you're on Instagram, and I'm not saying don't go on it. I want you to go follow Humanity Stoked because, you'll find out about the film, you'll see the clips. But, the fact of the matter is you have to have balance because if you have a social media account, say with Instagram, you are Instagram's product. You are the product. You're not their customer. You're the product that they then sell to advertisers. And they will game you as much as they can to make as much money off you as they can. And it's important to try and be mindful of that. And so, stay on social media, but keep some fucking balance about it,
Yeah, be aware, be present.
Yeah.
Don't let the chemicals win over you. Notice when you're feeling good or bad about the comparisons that we naturally will make when we're seeing the best of everything in the world. Like we follow the best of, and then we would compare it with yourself.
Yeah.
And then you feel, as you say, inadequate or not beautiful enough. And it should be the opposite. It's good to be inspired by high levels of anything, but you can't let that become a conversation of, oh, now I suck in comparison, or my numbers are not doing good anymore, and that means I'm not good anymore, or and etc. It's a tricky video game, and I'm so happy that I only started doing social media at age 26, 27. Once I was already formed as a human being and I was already doing my thing, I cannot imagine being a 13-year-old being trained by this phone and video game to have your whole life on like, look at me, am I good enough? Look at me, am I good enough? And compare, it's tricky.
One of the signs of intelligence, or the hallmarks or traits of an intelligent being, is the ability to recognize patterns. That pattern recognition skill is so important. And it's important to be mindful in life, including on social media, and recognize the patterns of what types of posts affect the way you feel about yourself. And to choose the types of things you're doing on social media, choose the types of accounts that you're following, and be mindful of how it's affecting you in the immediate and in the long term. And then be careful about it, whether you're limiting the amount of time on it or you're choosing more wisely the types of people and the types of accounts you follow and how you engage. And be mindful of when you could easily, and I know almost everyone could probably relate to this, you'll recognize suddenly when the social media is controlling you. You're actually doing things in reality based on how it will be perceived on social media. And if you're at that point, you better step on the fucking brakes and put the phone down for a day, a week, a month, whatever, because you are then someone's marionette. And that is not a place where you want to be.
Right. This is a very important conversation because like the algorithm is a kind of intelligence that we could compare with the AI. The
Yeah.
AI is a bunch of algorithms,
Yeah.
and it's become more and more sentient, conscious, but smarter. And we have to become smart enough to not let these Instagram or social media algorithms crush us,
Yeah.
because once AI fully comes to consciousness, it will treat us like it's little toys,
Yeah.
because it'll know which buttons to press, and we have to be really comfortable and confident in ourselves to not let a computer control us. Like,
Yeah.
it's important here.
And AI is not sentient yet, and at some point in the near future, it may be, and that's very scary. But even if it's not, the algorithms are still just written by man, even though algorithms can be written by AI too, and that'll happen more and more. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether the AI created the algorithms or the programmers created the algorithms. They are designed to game us on a psychological and emotional level. So yeah, we got to be careful about that. And and the things that we're talking about, we're talking about not the dangers of social media, but all of the ways that this affects us are the things that we're talking about in the film too.
Right.
So I'm grateful that the film became a platform that people can look at and then become more self-reflective and introspective about how things are making them feel, how they're treating themselves, and how they're treating people in the world all around them. And so
So let's go back to the film.
Yeah,
You were just telling me 2 seconds ago about people who are not living their real lives.
Yeah.
They took the wrong career path and they're just running with it, and they can't seem to be honest enough to be like, oh shit, like I'm living not my best life. I'm not living my real life.
Right.
And I want to live my passion, but I'm both scared to do something, that perhaps is risky, and also to come out and be like, oh, I wasn't really a lawyer all this last 20 years.
Yeah.
Now I want to be, a magician at a kids show. I don't know. But that happened to yourself too, right? You live in New York, you have a company, I believe, and all of a sudden you decided, I'm going to be a movie director and go about skateboarding and sensitivities.
Yeah.
Tell me about this whole process.
Yeah. It's hard for people to believe. It's hard sometimes even for me to believe, because now I'm asked to, I'm flown here, we'll fly you there, come talk to these kids about getting over fear, or talk to these people about how to be a producer or how to be a director. And I'm the ultimate, 50-year-old nobody from nowhere. And if 6 years ago you had said that I would be doing what I'm doing now, making a film or interviewing these people that were like heroes of mine when I was a kid, I would have you fucking committed to an insane asylum. It makes no sense, because it's astonishing. But as big as this film became, and it's huge, to this day, I have never read a book or watched a YouTube video on how to be a filmmaker, how to be a director, how to be a producer. And I am no advocate for ignorance. Like I tell people all the time, if you can get the opportunity, if you can create the opportunity, get to film school if you want to be a filmmaker, learn everything you can, read everything you can. For reasons I may or may not get into here, but I'm always open to. I knew at the point in my life that wasn't the proper thing to do for where I wanted to get in the time frame I wanted to get there. But yeah, so my whole life since I was 12, 13 years old, there were things that I wanted to do. I had a love of skateboarding. I've been a skater my whole life. Started at like 7 years old in New York. I wanted to be in filmmaking, whether producing, directing, acting in front of the camera. This was an art form. I don't know that I thought about it as an art form then, but I recognized it at a very early age. When I was like 7 or 8, my father took me to a movie. I don't know why he took me to this movie. Sadly, my dad's no longer with us, and I can't ask him. But at around 8 or 9, he took me to see Dog Day Afternoon. This is not a movie you take your 8-year-old to. If you don't know what it is, Google Dog Day Afternoon.
Is that like about a bank hijack and shootings and stuff like that?
Yep. And there was also, I think there was an implied love affair between the two leading men, Al Pacino and his co-star.
Ooh, I want to watch it now. Sounds fun.
But it wasn't directly addressed, but I think there was an allusion to it. But regardless, but I remember that and a few other movies that impacted my life when I was younger, including Silver Streak with Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor, which is why there's a clip of that movie in the B-roll of my film as I talk about in the documentary how movies affected me. And I'm fortunate that companies like Sony Pictures and Universal and Disney all gave us gratis licenses to use what we wanted to use. But yeah, I found that I was, not coincidentally, not surprisingly, there were movies in my life that impacted me, and the common denominator across those films were the leads were vulnerable, sensitive men. And I saw myself that way even as a kid, as this sensitive, kind of vulnerable, emotional kid. And so, but yeah, I knew I wanted to be in filmmaking, and I knew I wanted to be a humanitarian. I had no idea what that word was. I didn't think of it in those terms, but I wanted the world to be a more fair place because I was bullied a lot as a kid, and the world didn't always make a lot of sense to me, and I wanted to be a part of something that made it better. But I never had the courage to do anything about it. So when I was in my 20s, I thought I would go to film school, next year, next week, next month, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and ended up relying on kind of like maladaptive daydreaming, which is just daydreaming to a level where it's unhealthy. It ends up being satisfying enough to prevent you from moving forward, and it allows this bad combination of daydreams being satisfying enough so that the fears that you have of moving forward keep you right where you fucking are. And by the time I was like 48, 49, for a number of reasons in my life, I started slipping into a very bad depression. It lasted about a year and a half. And, I have two daughters, even though they were like kind of older a little bit. I couldn't kill myself. I'm like, so now what the hell am I going to do? And it was either die, which I wasn't going to do, or I was going to live fully. I just couldn't continue living as I was living. And this is like specifically related to my career, my personal life, not what was going interpersonal relationships, or just as a career. What was I doing? I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to do this. I wanted to do that. And I wasn't doing anything. And I had this fear that was justifiable, not like the unjustifiable fears that hold us back and when they shouldn't, but that if I was lucky enough to be, a 90-year-old guy, I'd be on my deathbed and filled with shame, as I should be at that point, not from not having become the things I wanted to become or achieve the things I wanted to achieve, but because of never having the courage to even try to give myself a chance. And so as I came out of that depression at 50, I just said that I am no longer going to let fear stop me from doing what I want to do. Not the fear of failure, which is a part of it, but for me, and I think for a lot of people, it's the fear of uncertainty, not knowing what steps to take. So you just don't take any steps at all. And I talk about that in the documentary. And it got to the point where I said, I'm just going to start moving forward. And the things, there will be questions, answers of which I don't have, that I will need to know, but to just have faith that I will figure those things out in time so that I'll be able to keep moving forward and just start doing it. I bought myself a used camera, wasn't terribly expensive, and I just started reaching out. And one of the first people I reached out to was Mr. Chris Dyer.
Oh, really? I was one of the first?
Yeah, because, what happened was I thought this was when I thought this film was going to be about, traveling the world and going to these places and, and talking about skateboarders doing good things. And I reached out to Michael Brook, who was the editor of Concrete Wave magazine. And I said, who can I interview? Who do you think would be good? And he told me about Rene Lacour from Amigo Skate in Cuba. And so I said, great, I'm going to go to Cuba. And I wanted to make this free concert for the skaters of Cuba. and it would be part of the documentary. We would do with him, he'd go skate. And I knew that they were involved in music and art, so I needed an artist down there. So I started Googling around, and I found you. And I don't know if you remember this, but I remember I was coming back somewhere in Brooklyn. I mean, I'm from New York. And I was in the car, and I got you on the phone somehow, you know. And we started talking, and I was telling you, and I said, I want you to come to Cuba with me. And we were having this really kind of vibey conversation. And I laughed because you said to me, you know, you sound like this guy I know, very positive and this kind of vibe. And I'm like, who? And you're like, this guy, Michael Brook. And I just laughed because I was like, yeah, I know Michael Brook, the editor of Concrete Wave magazine. And so in any event, so my plan was to bring down you, invited you to go to Cuba with me, and which was amazing. Like, hey, you don't know me, come to Cuba with me. I can't pay you shit. I will try and get your airfare covered. That's about all I could do.
Yeah.
And I want to bring down an iconic skater musician, and that ended up being Chuck Treese.
Uh-huh.
And this Grammy-winning Afro-Latin jazz composer and pianist, which Arturo O'Farrell, somehow, I cannot tell you how, only you would know, at least in your example, I convinced all of you to go to Cuba with me. No one knew me from Adam the week before. And you all came to Cuba with me, and we started filming. So yeah, I just bought a used camera. And the funny thing is, a week before I got on that plane to Cuba, I drove down to Philly where Nick Lang, who became my DP for the first year and a half or so of the film, and he literally showed me how to use that camera. I hadn't run sound before. I hadn't done any of this before. And I remember like setting up the camera, he was helping me, and I'm like, dude, just let me do it. Don't show me. I have to, just tell me and let me do it. I need to figure it out on my own. You won't be there in Cuba with me. And so when I filmed Rene, his interview in Cuba, that was the first time I had ever conducted an interview. And I just set up this, we used natural light for that interview, but to run sound and set up the camera and get it going, it was the first time I did anything. So it's kind of funny when I look back at it now affectionately at how green I was at the time. Yeah, it's just astonishing. And that interview, that first interview that I filmed alone with Renee, ended up closing out Act 1 and being an extremely emotional part of the film that resonates very deeply with people.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I remember that Cuba trip very fondly. I waited for years before I went to Cuba. Like for Canadians to go to Cuba, it's very cheap and easy since like we don't have the embargo situation as the United States has. They make it really easy for Canadians to go. I could have gone really easy, but I wanted to go to Cuba to do some service because I know they struggle. My brother had been before and he had brought some skateboards to Cuba, and that always inspired me. So when you told me like, hey, let's go to Cuba, bring skateboards, you know, to the skate community of Cuba, paint them a mural, teach painting workshop, I was like, hell yeah, like I don't care about getting paid, like that sounds like a beautiful experience. And since you paid my flight, then I was like, wow, I can pay the flight for my filmer, because
For Ben,
for Ben Jackson, who has been on this podcast. He's episode number 10 if anybody wants to catch an interview with Ben Jackson. But that was the only time I was able to afford to bring my filmer on one of my trips, because at the time I was doing a video project called The Art Ventures, which was a traveling show. That's episode 28 is Cuba, of us going to Cuba.
Which I have a small spot in, a tiny little spot in.
Oh, nice. Oh, no, you're around. I think I interviewed you.
In the casa, in the bottom of the casa.
Right.
In Old Havana,
So that was a really cool experience for me. I really appreciate it. I didn't know you were just starting your movie. I was just like, oh, he's starting his movie. But I guess once you had Chris Dyer in your film, then everybody else lined up to get in there, huh? Just joking. If I would have known that, you know, all these big people like Tony Hawk and Alva and Hosoi and Neil deGrasse Tyson and who else is in there? Shepard Fairey,
Chad Muska, Lissie Armanto,
like etc. etc. If I would have known all those people would be on that movie, I would have even been more stoked. But you know, I got in before they got in, and then the movie, like, you know, mushroomed into this really huge thing. How did you get those big names in the film?
So I'll tell you, but at the time, if you told me that any of those names would be in my movie, I would again be like, dude, you are tripping on something, bro. But before I answer that question, a quick shout out to Ben Jackson. Ben, thank you. I just want to let people know Ben came as like your filmer to do for your thing, like, you know, to Cuba. And Ben was unbelievable. And I said, Ben, do you have any clips that maybe I can use? I might need some B-roll. Like, you have another camera, you're filming stuff. And I thought that Ben would say, you know, give me a couple of clips or whatever. And just the kind heart of this guy, Ben, who's a great cinematographer. He gave me his entire memory card. He was just like, you know, whatever you want, just take it.
Yeah.
And of course, I credited Ben in the film. Of course, special thanks, and listed him on the IMDb page and all this stuff. And so, well, I'm very grateful to Ben, because in the scenes of the movie that you're in, including this very emotional sequence at the end of Act 2, we're using some of the some of the B-roll is from Ben's camera, and also in the banger of the film, the first like high energy, like 30-second opener of the film, there's a time lapse of you doing a mural in Cuba, not the emotional one. And that was also from Ben's camera, because I remember he was setting up with me his time lapse SLR, and I was like, oh yeah. So anyway, shout out to Ben Jackson.
Shout out to Ben Jackson.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
He was my editor for the whole Art Venture series, and then he started this podcast with me. He did the first 40 episodes of the podcast.
Wow.
But once he was in Montreal and I was in the States, it became easier to work with local editors. And now my girlfriend Paulina is the editor, so things keep on evolving. But always have him as one of my good friends, and I hope to see him in some future whenever I visit, or when he visits me.
A couple of years later, Ben came to New York, and he came out to Long Island, and we met Ben, had dinner with him, and went to Jones Beach, I think, and it was nice to see Ben again. I hope to see him again soon.
Yeah,
Ben's great,
and he's a great skater too. That always would call me when I was in Montreal. I was like, Chris, let's go skating. Let's go surf. He surfs the river, which is, I don't want to jump in the Montreal dirty ass river to surf, but he would jump all the time. He would go in fucking winter. Like he's fucking gonna get like so cold, and he's very motivated. But yeah, that Cuba trip was awesome. Thank you so much for bringing me. And tell me, once again, going back to the questions, tell me, how did you first get Tony Hawk? How do you get Neil deGrasse Tyson? How do you get Shepard Fairey?
So one of the most fascinating stories, entertaining stories, happens to be Neil deGrasse Tyson. Because Neil deGrasse Tyson was one of the people I wanted in the film very early on set, but I had no idea if he had any connection to skating. Because everyone in the film had to be a skater, former skater, or have some. There's only 2 or 3 people that aren't skaters or former skaters, but are so deeply connected to skating that they're in through that association. One of those people, for example, is Steve Van Doren, the Van of Vans. He's not really skateboarding, but who are you going to think of that's more attached to the skating community than Steve? But in any event, I knew Neil was a hero of mine. You know, I don't get starstruck, or I don't care who you are, whether you're a famous actor, whether you're Tony Hawk, but I don't really give a shit about what you're able to do in terms of, you know, whether you're an athlete or, you know, you're a singer or whatever it is. Like, for me, I'm moved by someone's ability to impact positive change in the world. Tony Hawk actually does that, and in particular through inspiring other people who then go on to do other things that were so deeply inspired by Tony. And there's a very significant example of that at the closing credits of our film. This like 3-minute clip comes on between Tony Hawk and this other cast member, and you really get to understand and see the power that Tony Hawk had to inspire other people, and how that ripple effect went and impacted hundreds and hundreds of children's lives. But all right, so in any event, Neil deGrasse Tyson. This was the beginning. So again, I had no connections. I never met a filmmaker. I never met a pro skater. How was Neil deGrasse Tyson's team? I thought, well, they're never even going to return my fucking email. Where would I even send the email? So I'm like, I have to game the system. So I'm always thinking outside the box. So I designed this gorgeous longboard. Gorgeous. And on the bottom of it is a picture of Tyson, like an observatory, and a couple of my two favorite quotes of his having to do with, for example, the importance of promoting and encouraging people to achieve something versus celebrating people that already have. Like, why aren't we doing the former versus the latter more? But in any event, I designed this beautiful longboard, and it was the coloring of the purple, and I made the wheels purple, and it was just like a piece of art, this board. And I sent it to the Museum of Natural History, where the observatory, the planetarium is that he's the chair of, and even the box for that longboard was crisp white lines, white triple corrugated, and I'm like, this is not going to show up. Someone's not going to just let it sit in the corner of a room. Someone's going to give it to Neil, right? And I put a cover letter inside and a little sand timer, a 3-minute sand timer. And I'm like, Neil, if you don't know who I am, but if you flip this when you meet me, and at the end of 3 minutes, I'll get up and leave if you want me to leave. And I thought, I was like, oh, I'm so clever. Like, this is going to work. Neil will get this, and I will get a meeting with him. And I sent that off UPS to the planetarium at the museum. And then within 2 weeks, I hadn't heard back from him. And then within 2 months, I hadn't heard back from him. And I never heard back from him ever. Okay. And I was so bummed. And after about 6 months of calling the museum and it was starting to create this negative energy. And I realized this chasing vibe was working against me psychologically. So I thought, I need to let this go. Maybe I'll find a way to Neil, or maybe I won't. But this is now counterproductive. It's not making me feel good. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, oh, well, whatever. I still felt it was a good idea to do. And I was still proud of the idea. All right, so in any event, years later, the part of Humanity Stoked that has to do with environmental issues and climate change and all this stuff, which is where I wanted Neil to be, we're now almost done. The editing, we're literally about to like picture lock, if you will, that segment, meaning it's done. We're now moving on in the editing process. And once that's done, you can't really edit it. Because like if something's done, you drop someone in, it affects everyone around it, and it becomes like this exponentially difficult just ball of tangled wire. So I'm like, that's it. I guess I'm never going to get Neil. And then out of nowhere, in my DMs on Instagram, this woman out in the Midwest somewhere sends me a screenshot. And what is it a screenshot of? I didn't know this, but Neil deGrasse Tyson has millions of followers on his TikTok. And he was doing, a few days earlier, a live stream to his millions of TikTok followers. And he's holding my goddamn skateboard. And I have the picture. I can show it to you if you want to edit it in. He's clearly talking about it. He's like gesturing about the skateboard. And I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, please call me. And she calls me. And I'm like, what is this? And she's like, yeah, he was talking about how when you're famous, people start sending you shit. And how someone sent him this beautifully made skateboard, but there's no cover letter. He doesn't remember where. Maybe it was lost and he doesn't know who sent it.
Oh, no.
But she saw the Humanity Stoked logo on the board. Thank God I put that on there, and started Googling and found me. So I'm like, I'm freaking out. So I then start composing this letter to Neil. I'm like, I'm the guy who sent you the skateboard. I designed it. I want you to be in my documentary. And I sent you the letter. I don't know where it is. Blah, 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 blah. I was wired up. I'm so excited. And I wrote the letter, the email, but I didn't know where to send it. So I then put like a line break on top of my email. I then pasted that photo, and I wrote, to whomever you are, if you know Neil deGrasse Tyson, look at this photo. He was live streaming. He wants to know where it came from. I'm the guy. Please forward this email to Neil. And then I just sent that everywhere. Info at museum, info at like Nat Geographic. I would just sent it everywhere. I would go to Instagram, or I Google like Neil deGrasse Tyson images and see of all the pictures of people that he was with. And if I could identify any of them, I would try and find an email for them, and I would send it to them. Wow. I just blasted the world with this fucking email.
Wow, what
and
a motivation.
Then I just crossed my fingers. And then about a week later, right in my inbox one day, is a very long, personally written, meaningful email from Neil from his own email account. Like, mystery solved, now I know. And he went on to tell me how he feels documentarians are the truth tellers and so important, and he'd be honored to be in my film. I'm on fire right now. I'm like, this is fucking crazy. I can't fucking believe this. The idea from years ago, it actually worked. Not in the way that I had hoped, but it worked. I'm now talking to Neil. He wants to be in the film, and this was in the middle of COVID, and so he said the interview will have to be outdoors, so we'll do it in New York in a few months. Once it warms up, it was still winter, and we'll do it downtown towards the lower part of Manhattan where he is. And so now I'm faced with this really difficult challenge because, one, I need to interview him in the next few days because we're going to lock up. We're editing the segment. And so I write an email to him. I don't know if I'm going to send it. And it's basically, Neil, thank you. Two things. One, I don't have the money or the permits. I don't have the insurance. If you film on the street in New York City, it's not as bad as LA. But as soon as you put sticks, like a tripod on the ground, you need a city permit. You need to pay the police department to provide security. You need insurance. I can't. So I'm like, no, I can't do that. I would need you to convince the Museum of Natural History, where the planetarium that he chairs is, to allow them to convince them to allow me to film on their property.
Yeah.
So I don't have to deal with New York City's permitting bullshit. And I said, also, we need to do your interview in the next few days because we're locking it up. And that was one of the hardest emails I ever had to send because I'm like, I was now given this gift at 11 hours and 59 minutes and I'm going to flush it down the toilet with this really ballsy fucking reply. And I'm just like,
you gotta keep it real though.
I'm like, I gotta send. And I was like, oh God, what did I just do? And, and a couple hours later, he emailed me back and it just said, done. Tuesday, I will give you up to an hour outside as long as it's at least 45 degrees Fahrenheit. I will give you an hour outside at the museum, CC the museum people. And I was like, son of a bitch. And then I had a day to find a crew. Ien had now already left in COVID to go back to LA. I had to find 2 people to operate 2 cameras that would film this with me and do it without getting paid. Because the ethos of the film was no one gets paid for anything. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you're doing. I don't get paid. No one gets paid. Even like I said, all the Grammy-winning musicians that helped work on the score and everything is gratis. And within a day, I had the people to film it with me. And 2 days later, there we were in New York City. It was around 48 degrees or something. When you look at the film, this is how much of a badass Neil deGrasse Tyson is. You have no idea. Sitting across from him, you'll see me, I'm in like a snorkel parka with the fur around the thing and the mittens. The cameramen are just, all bundled up. And he's there without a jacket. He had a layer or 2 on, but comfortable as all hell. You would have no idea how goddamn cold it was. And I interviewed Neil outside for about an hour.
Wow, what a badass.
And yeah, he's a badass. And by the way, one of the most genuine, sincere, kind, loving people because, and...
Did he have a connection to skateboarding?
Yeah, it turned out he did, of course. Yeah, he couldn't be in the movie otherwise. He was a former skater. He used to skate as a kid. And in the credits of the film, there's a clip of him talking about how he hadn't been on a skateboard in years and talking about why he has so much admiration and respect for skateboarding and for skateboarders. It's in the credits of the film, so people are going to love that. And I posted that little clip on Instagram. It went fucking viral. But the cool thing is about Neil, I said, Neil, by the way, that skateboard, you can keep it, of course. It was a gift, but I'm hoping you would sign it and give it back to me for a charity auction because I'm going to have a massive charity auction we're going to do. And he brought it to the interview. It's in the background when you'll see it. And at the end of the interview, when he went to give it to me, because he said, I'll bring it and give it to you, of course, there was some trepidation as he tried to give it to me. And I'm like, Neil, do you want to keep the skateboard? And he's like, well, it is a conversation starter. And I'm like, so I tell you what, I'm like, give me the skateboard. I'm going to make 2 more, one for you to sign, give to me, and I'll make one and I can sign it and give it to you. And so now there are 3, one hanging in Neil's office, one hanging in my home studio and one for the charity auction.
Nice.
But when I brought it back months later for him to sign, I thought I would just literally have a minute with Neil. And this is the type of person Neil is. While with him, he read an Instagram post that I had made earlier about my story, how I lived this fear-based life and was depressed, and I came out of it and made this film and started my children's foundation, the What Stops You, the Roar Foundation, and everything. And he read it, and I thought he would just like glance over it and be like, "Oh, it's very nice." He read it like with such intent, and then he looked at me and he said, "You know," he said, expressed his pride that I had been able to get there, that I figured it out, that I did it. And he said, "You know, your post and you remind me of the song The Rose. Have you ever listened to that song and listened to the lyrics?" He said to me, and I'm like,
By who?
It was from the movie The Rose. I think it was Bette Midler.
Okay.
But the song was about getting over fear. In the context of the movie, it had to do with, I think, more about the fear of having love and lost versus never loved at all and stuff like that. But it was relatable, and it was about someone overcoming fear. And he said to me, "You know what?" And I do not. What? And he said, "Let's listen to it together."
Aha.
And there I was in Neil's office, sitting there. He opened up his like Spotify or whatever he was on, streaming on his phone, whatever he had, and we sat together and listened to the song. And just, I thought to myself, what in the fuck happened to my life? Like, is this even real? I'm sitting here with this hero of mine, and he wants me to, relate to this song with him, and it was just so deeply meaningful. And I didn't want to be one of those people that like, Neil, I'm gonna like not be present and film this. But towards the end of it, I'm like, Neil, I need to capture this. It's so meaningful to me. And I just held my phone out and I caught him. And that clip, as I turned around, the elevator door opened and it like, bong, and I laughed. And that clip is also in the credits. That moment that I shared with Neil after. He's a special. He's a special person.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing these intimate stories with us.
Yeah.
You said in this story that, nobody gets paid in your movie.
That is correct.
What does that mean? And if there's any money made if you ended up selling the movie to Netflix or HBO or whoever buys it, whatever streamer, where does that money go? Tell me about the financials here.
Sure. So I made it a condition for working with me on the film in any capacity, whether you were providing B-roll or archival footage or music, like the original score, anything, whomever you are, if you're working on the film, you're doing animation, whatever, operating cameras, it was gratis, not a back-end payment, not a delayed payment. I took a lot of in-kind services as support from a tremendous amount of amazing individuals and companies, and I want to recognize that, and I want people to recognize that. I'm going to tell them what to do that. But if you couldn't work on this film with me for free, then it just wasn't the right project for you, either at all or maybe not at that time in your life. And so we all worked on it as volunteers for free. And so that way, 100% of the revenue it generates, whether it's from streaming or from a distribution deal with HBO or whomever it may go to, from merch, all of them, not just profit, because it's all profit. 100% of the revenue in perpetuity will go to the What Stops You, the Roar Foundation, which is in the United States called a 501c3, which is recognized by the government as a tax-free charity. Yeah. And so when you donate to it, you could deduct that from your taxes in the U.S. anyway. And like the film itself, that foundation pays no salary, it pays no rent, it has virtually no expenses, everything's donated, and all the money will go there to help have a positive impact on children's lives, especially those in living at or below the poverty line in underprivileged school districts. The goal of that foundation is to help children avoid a life that I lived, which is being derailed by fear, guided by fear, to help children and young adults understand fear, how not to let that control your life, because, and this is so key, Chris, I believe this so firmly, that when you're living a life that is not satisfying because you feel like you're not where you want to be, whether you think that's because you're not making enough money, or you're not in the profession that you want to be in, or you're not at the level you want to be at in a given profession, whatever it is, when you feel like you're not satisfied with your life, it is really hard for a person like that to care about the lives of others. And even if they do, it's hard for them and less likely for them to actually take action to impact the lives of others in a positive way. It'll always be, once I get my shit figured out, then I'll help others. And so by helping people live a more fearless and fulfilling life, where they have more contentment, and it's more likely that those people will be in a position to want to and actually take action to impact the lives of the people around them, whether it's in their family and friends, their community, their state, their country, globally. And so there's a tremendous ripple effect in helping people not live fear-based lives. And the foundation does that by sending speakers that could help talk to children and young adults at organizations and schools that would not otherwise be able to afford to pay for that speaker to come in and talk to them. And that's what the foundation does. So, by the way, if anyone who's watching this, and I've never asked anyone for money in the making of this film, not once. But if you're watching this and you have financial means to make a donation to a charitable organization, and it's something you like to do, then please go to whatstopsyou.org. You can make a credit card donation, or there's information there where you could send a check to help support that foundation, because it does important work in helping people. So thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to plug that foundation. And that's where, so hopefully we'll get a big fat distribution deal, and that money will go to the foundation. But right now that foundation is starving, and I have schools right now waiting for a speaker, and I have approved them, but there's no money to pay for even a speaker's travel. And I have speakers that get anywhere from $800, $500 to $15,000, $20,000 typically to travel to a place, like if they're doing a big keynote somewhere. I have speakers that are like, man, I will do it for free. Just pay for my expenses to get my ass over there and back home. Right. No charge. And I'm like, I don't need that. Foundation doesn't even have the money because of COVID. It lost all its funding, and so it needs a corporate sponsor now. So the foundation needs that money. Well, badly.
I'll try to donate not as Chris Dyer, but as the Galactic Gang, because the Galactic Gang, which is my NFT community, we have some charity money to allocate, and I'm always looking for where to pass it along, which is aligned with me and my community. So I'll talk with my people and see if we can send some.
Thank you. And I do want to reiterate, I've never asked anyone involved in this film ever for a donation, not even to the charity. It was like, I'm like reaching out to the people listening, because some people listening are struggling to pay the bills like most of us, but some people are fortunate, they have money and they regularly donate to charities. And I'm saying, okay, if you do that, hey, consider the foundation.
Right. Well, you give if you can, if you have the means, and if you don't, you don't, and no guilt on that. It's like your foundation wants to fill the cups of others, so then they themselves can give.
Yep. Exactly.
Seems like you've given a lot of yourself to this film, not getting paid, giving lots of your time. You've given years of your life to do this movie, and you're not even gonna make any money from it. Are you filling up your cup enough so that you can give to others? Or is it your cup already overflowing just by the vibes that you can give and not get anything back and not need anything back?
Yeah, people have often said to me, hey, you need to eat too. And I'm like, I'm okay. I have a small business, it helps me pay the bills. Things are tight now more than ever. Definitely struggling more than I was. But what I'm doing now for the first time in my life, not interpersonal relationships, not family and stuff, but I'm on a professional level. This is the first time in my life I'm actually doing something I've wanted to do my entire life. And it's interesting because I'm like, well, no, I'm not making any money, but I think the goal of making money, at least for me, would be personal freedom to do the things I want to do in my life. And I'm like, I'm doing the things I want to do in my life. I don't have to make, look, I'd like to make $1 million a day if I could. There's nothing wrong with making money. But it just can't be the end all be all and motivation for everything I do. And even though I'm not getting paid on this project, I'm literally living in a fantasy world. When I thought of this project, when I conceived of it, you know, you have your idea of like, what could it actually be? You know, could it actually inspire people? Could it resonate with people? Will people want to see this? You know, you have like your reasonable expectations, you have your optimistic expectations, and you have your crazy fantasy expectations that are so optimistic you don't even tell anyone because it's humiliating. Like, dude, get your fucking feet back on the ground. And I'm like, this became higher than the highest of those levels. So far beyond.
It's a Cinderella story.
So, dude, so far beyond. No 50-year-old, like with no filmmaking experience, no connections. I never met a filmmaker. I never met a pro skater. I'm just going to make a movie at 50 and I have no funding. I have no money. I have no experience. I have no backing. And then this fucking global phenomenon happens. I'm literally living in a state of just, I'm living in a fantasy state.
Well, you're an example that when you give, you get double. You know, when you're aligned with the Most High, whatever you want to call it, and you're in service for love and giving vibes, then it backs you up and brings forth what you need, and it rewards you with, you know, the energy you need to keep on being of service, because more of that is needed on this planet.
Yeah.
And you're creating it through your foundation and through the movie. So congrats to you. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I want to add something to that because it's so important, because I think a lot of people who are maybe not on like the spiritual plane, and they're maybe not so optimistic, or they're not so positive, and they have reasons to be pessimistic, or you know, not have such lofty ideals about what could be.
There's people like that in the world still?
There's a couple. But I don't ever want to come off as this person that is just so out of touch with reality and tell people, you just jump and the net will appear. You know, sometimes you have to jump and the net will appear. And I recommend you take that jump, and that net can appear after. And sometimes that's the only way you could do it. But I'm not saying the net will always appear. You can't go through and forge ahead and do this stuff knowing that it's going to pay out double or triple like it did for me. It might and it might not. I'm just saying it is worth the risk. You have to give yourself the chance. And I'm fortunate in that it did work out beyond my wildest dreams and expectations. It may not always, but something happened, and this is so key. This was about maybe halfway or 3/4 through production. Maybe I just shifted from production to post-production, which is, if you're not in the film business, that's like when you're actually filming and interviewing, and then post-production, now you're editing and doing all the stuff behind the scenes. But I had this realization that the fear that I had that I'd be 90 years old and be on my deathbed and being filled with shame because, as I said before, I had never had the courage to really even try and do the things that I thought would make me happy, that I saw as my purpose in life, that I realized that no matter what happened with the film, if I didn't really finish it, or if I finished it, it was a piece of dog shit and no one really watched it and it was an embarrassment, whatever it was, the fear of not having tried, that fear was gone. That ship fucking sailed. I did it, and I just let down. I just started just bawling. I was just crying. I was in my kitchen, and I just was overwhelmed with this sense of satisfaction and this joy and the realization that for the rest of my life, no matter what happened with this film, that shameful fear was gone forever. It was just vaporized. It was nullified. I did it. And so everything that happened from that point forward, that the film was finished, that it's being received the way it is around the world, that this iconic, amazing cast of people, both in front and behind the camera, joined it, it's all gravy.
Yeah.
And I will tell you this, there's way too many people to thank on this podcast, but I encourage people, please go to humanitystoked.com, and on the menu you could see the film's credits. I encourage people to go there and watch the film's credits. You could watch a video of it. You could also like scroll through the text of it to see all of the people that are involved in the production of the film with me. And you can also see on the supporter page of the website all of the companies and individuals that help make it happen, by like, Western Digital that provided thousands of dollars in digital storage, and Zeiss that gave me a lens that was like thousands of dollars just for a single lens, and like there's probably hundreds of companies and individuals, and they all deserve to be acknowledged. If you're looking for someone in the business to work with, and it's a paid gig, please go to humanitystoked.com and go to the credits and look, try and choose someone from that list, because these are people that are talented and they have heart and they deserve to be recognized, and they deserve to be given opportunities to potentially get paid for their skill and their talent. And so yeah, please do that. And because it's not just me. There's a ton of people involved. So
well, that's awesome,
yeah.
and I feel so honored to be part of this project. So thank you so much for including me.
Thank you, Chris.
I want to talk about your audience. So
Okay.
this movie obviously is a skateboard documentary, or a documentary that has skateboarding as its focal pillars or uniting glue, and there's lots of skateboard documentaries out there that record the history of skateboarding. We got the Dogtown documentary. We got the Steve Rocco 90s documentary. We got the, Bones Brigade documentary. We got a number of skateboard documentaries. This is a very different one that probably will appeal to anybody, may they be a skateboarder or not, which is really great.
Yeah.
But still, you have skateboarding as a center point of this thing.
Yes.
From my personal experience, skaters can be lovers, and probably got all the lover skaters in the film, but there's also a lot of haters. Skaters are very protective of their culture because so many aspects of society just likes to throw a skateboard in the mix, and now you're cool just because you got a skateboarder. So there's a lot of haters too, and they're like, who are you to grab my culture in a appropriation kind of way and milk it for your benefit or the benefit of your thing. I know I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, but some skaters could come at you that way.
Yeah.
How do you feel when some skaters might probably like push you back because you're not the right kind of skater, or what's your relation? So this is my question. What's your relationship with skateboarding? Are you a skater is what somebody would ask you. And, what's your level of comfort interacting with this culture, to bring forth your message, which goes past skateboarding?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm largely, and the film is largely, immune to that unless you're an ignorant idiot. And I'll tell you why. And for those people that want to, have that approach with me, I'm happy for them to go fuck themselves. I have not really experienced that, and I'll tell you why. One, a few points that are really important to understand here. One, I'm a lifelong skater. I've been skating since 1974-ish, give or take. So, like, my feeling, like, if I want to hold my board by the trucks as I, walk down the street because it's more comfortable for me, and you think you're going to step up and tell me that I'm doing some type of mall grab, if I want to hold the board between my ass cheeks, that's my fucking business. Who the fuck are you?
Who made that rule that you can't grab your board by the trucks? It's so much more comfortable. What is this?
Well, if you're holding it by the nose, then it's more efficient to throw. And I'm like, dude, I'm just taking a walk. I'm not trying to,
I'm not fronting here.
Yeah, like, I don't give a shit. You go fuck off. Like, you're laughable to me. Having said that, I do understand and respect that hardcore skaters resent the co-opting of their or our culture. I get it. So I'm not saying you're wrong to resent the co-opting of it, the disingenuous co-opting of it. I get it. I'm just saying I'm not making a film about skateboarding. And I'm not saying we're the real fucking skateboarders. I'm just saying this is not what this film is. This is a film about human issues, and everyone in it is connected to skateboarding. And so it's really like adjacent to that issue. It's not like we're saying we're the cool skateboarders. We're just saying, hey, if you're in this film, you are a skater, a former skater. We have a love of skateboarding. It's a common thread. But we're not even talking about skateboarding. And so if anyone in the film thinks, oh, the film isn't cool enough or whatever, okay, don't see it. I don't care. But I know that I made a film that's not for skateboarders. It is for human beings. If you're on Earth and you are a human being, this film is for you. And of course, the skateboarding has a built-in audience because these are the heroes of skate. These are skating's most iconic figures through the decades. And so yeah, skateboarders are going to love this. I have not yet had any of that experience. I haven't had anyone come to me and say that, because it's not like I'm some Hollywood dude and now all of a sudden I'm going to decide to make a skateboarder movie. I've been a skateboarder for longer than most people. I'm 56. Yeah, there are guys in their 60s, 70s, and 80s that skate, but I mean, for the most part, yeah, if you want to step up to me and tell me I'm not a skateboarder, you're a joke to me. And I ask myself and I ask people, like, why are you skating? Like, are you skating because you want people to know how cool you are? Are you skateboarding because you want to make yourself feel cool? Or are you skateboarding for the reason that I skateboard? I just love skateboarding. Yeah. And I'm not even that great. I'm not like I was never really into street skating. And I only learned to skate transition invert until the first time I was ever on a ramp, I was 52. I built a 40-foot, 16-foot wide, 40-foot long, 8-foot tall half pipe in my backyard that was based on a 6-foot ramp tech kit that I bought used and then blew it out, put a roll in on one side, and I didn't even learn that type of skating until, and by the way, I didn't learn transition invert until I was in my 50s because I was scared. When I moved from New York to Southern California for 2 years when I was 10 years old, I saw Tony Alva in Skateboarder magazine, photographs of him by Glenn E. Friedman. Again, unfathomable that both Friedman and Alva would be in a movie I would make. Bizarro. But I didn't ask my mom to take me to the skate park because I was afraid I wasn't cool enough. I felt intimidated. What a fucking shame. A whole life of a different type of skateboarding I could have been involved in. Not that I ever would have became pro, but I mean, how much joy would I have had that I cheated myself out of because I was afraid of being judged at a skate park? What an idiot.
Right. Well, the issues that your movie is trying to tackle about fear and issues of the whole world also are being tackled in skateboarding. Maybe not so directly, but the issues of the world of judgment, of insecurities, of fear are very present in skateboarding. To have one group of skateboarders be like, oh, we're the right kind of skater and you're the wrong kind of skater. Like, what the fuck? Like, we're all skaters. Let their boards be long, short, whatever shape. Let's just have fun here, please.
Do you know how many people, and by the way, when I skate now, when I travel, I always have my regular, it's like a regular popsicle. I think I have a 8 1/4 deck, 33. But I love longboarding too. I love e-boarding. I love all types of skateboarding. But I have so many people when they skateboard and they tell me about it. If they're like, well, I'm not a skateboarder. I'm this, or I'm not. Yeah, I ride this kind of. And I'm like, dude, you're a skateboarder. I don't care if you're street, you're transition, you're longboarding, whatever it is, dude. You're skateboarding, and you're a skateboarder. And the problem I have with people, and again, I acknowledge, I resent too if somebody or some company suddenly just co-opts it and presents themselves as skaters when they're not. I get it, but at the same time, when people say skateboarding should not be in the Olympics, or that's not skateboarding, that's what you're doing, the problem I have with it is this. What that means is, for them to be right, it means one person or one group owned skateboarding, and they have the right to define it. And I don't want anybody to own and define skateboarding.
Right.
This is a form of artistic self-expression, and it is not my fucking business to tell someone else you can't skate the way you want to skate, or you can, but you don't get credit for being a skateboarder. That's not skateboarding, or you don't belong here. Or if someone wants to get on a board with 4 wheels and push and do what they want to do on it, I am fucking happy that they want to skateboard.
Yeah.
I'm happy for them. I don't need to own it. I don't need to control it, and I don't need to respect anyone else's feeling that they should.
Right.
Again, I don't like co-opting any culture, whether you're Native American culture, Black culture, any culture. I'm not down with the co-opting of that. That's fucked up. I get that, but there's a place between that and thinking you own and get to define what skateboarding is for other people, and that I am not down with.
Well, for me, skateboarding is about freedom,
Right.
self-expression, maybe even being a rebel against society and doing something that is not allowed many times. And then as skateboarding grows with time, it's calcified a little bit with like, oh, now there's some rules. Now there's the right way. Now I'm
Right.
going to put some walls around it. So
Yeah.
it's sometimes it's doing the opposite of what it's supposed to be doing, liberating us, allowing us to express ourselves with however the fuck we are. And that's a pity. So I think this movie will help defragment that,
Yeah,
it'll be like an antivirus being like, hey, can we just all just be whatever the fuck we are
Yeah.
without judgment?
Yeah.
Let's drop this fucking judgment.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%, man. And by the way, I have a couple of different types of e-boards. There's electric skateboards, then there are longboards. And I love that. And for me, that is a form of meditation, because what happens is if I can get out on some virgin blacktop and I'm just, for an hour, I'm not pushing. So I'm in this kind of flow state where I'm just carving. I'm just in this flow state, and it's really grounding for me. And like, it's one of the few things I could do in my life where my thoughts stop. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just present and grounded in that moment, in that flow state. And it's a beautiful experience for me. It's calming, it's healing. If you want to tell me I'm not skateboarding at that time, I think you're an idiot. But, it's not for me to tell anyone else. And again, I love all types of skateboarding. And as a quick tangent, I have a friend of mine who's in the cast who produced and directed another skateboarding doc that I recommend. It's not out yet. It's on the verge of being released right now, so I don't know when this is going to air. But Google Virgin Blacktop, which is a beautiful documentary, another skateboard film, and it's about a group of kids that formed this kind of club years ago, and they were called the Wizards in New York. And the documentary, Charlie Samuels is a photographer and is a filmer, and he has a lot of iconic photos. He has stuff in Thrasher, a lot of stuff with Harold Hunter from back in the day. But it's this kind of beautiful film that follows the path of these kids and the Wizards. They're now like in their 50s or 60s, and it's like it follows their whole life through, and it's just a very heartwarming, beautiful film. So yeah, check out Virgin Blacktop, cool film, and Charlie Samuel's a great guy.
I love anything skateboarding,
Yeah.
Like I love the culture of skateboarding. As I have just turned 44 and my knee, is on shaky grounds, it becomes harder and harder to shred or whatnot. I never want to stop skateboarding, but it has a dear place in my heart. If I had to stop skateboarding, perhaps to be respectful towards my artist hands, I would never stop being a skateboarder in my heart, So I understand that skateboarding transcends even the act of skateboarding as you get older. It's just how it is, and we shouldn't, limit ourselves in our personal perception of who we are and who's our authentic self. So, let me congratulate you once again for this beautiful movie. I want to ask you, now that you've done your first movie and it was a success, or, it's a success already, even just in the film festivals. And once it comes out, who knows how big it will be, and you'll make me a superstar in relationship to it. But do you plan to do more movies? Do you plan to continue following this path of self-expression and creation?
Yeah, like I said, this was my dream to be a filmmaker. I'd love to be able to have a career doing other films. And for a year, since the premiere in Finland, which the film wasn't really fully done yet. But I'm often asked that, what's your next film? And I've always said the same thing. I've waited, 40, 50 years to get here. I just want to exist in this moment and be present and not worried about what I'm doing next. When I cross this finish line, when I get the film across the finish line, which we're right there, which is to lock the distribution deal and then hand it off to whomever, whether it's HBO or Netflix or Hulu, whatever. Then I'll think more about. Having said that, I did only just a couple of weeks ago for the first time realize what film I want to make next, if it is not a narrative, if it's a documentary, what that would be about. And so it feels good. It took me a long time because I realized how much work, and it's not the hours that you have to put in, which is unfathomable. I've done days where you're working like 18 hours, and it's like it's the amount. It's anyone could put 18-hour days in, whether you're digging ditches or you're reading through charts in the financial world, whatever it is. Anyone could work hard, but in an art form, the amount of like passion and heart and soul that has to go into those hours, you could phone it in like any other job, but you're going to produce a piece of shit. And to have that level of passion for those days, for that amount of years, it is not sustainable unless it's a subject matter that you care deeply, deeply about. Mm-hmm. And so that was the struggle for me. What subject needs to have its story told that hasn't been told yet by a million people, mm-hmm. that I'm passionate enough about to make that level of dedication sustainable over the production of a film, which takes a long time. And so, I'm kind of narrowing that down to where I want to be. So,
do you have ideas? You'd rather not give it in?
Yeah, yep.
What would be some subject matter for future movies for you?
It has to do with the division that's being sowed amongst people in the world.
That's a very important issue.
Not just in politics. Politics is a big part of that, of course.
Right.
On both sides of it, but generally speaking, just throughout humanity, the division that's being sowed, the reasons why, the ramifications of that, and to explore that in a unique kind of way, because there really aren't any subjects that you could think of to make a documentary about that probably isn't already made or currently in production or will be tomorrow, just because the advent of digital technology kind of dropped the barriers to filmmaking down for a lot of people. And so, it's hard to find an original subject that's never been told before. So the key is, how do you tell a story in a way that's unique enough to make it interesting to people, and in a way that it could connect with people on an emotional level. That's the key. And you need also talented people to work with you, from your cinematography to everything else. It has to be done in a way that's special.
That's an important subject matter, the division. I feel right now that the only way we will succeed at whatever the topic is, maybe the environment or wars or whatever, is if we realize that we're all one at the core. Yeah. And sure, we could all do documentaries recording what has happened, but I think you will go more to the root of things, the psychological seed that is creating this division. And perhaps if we can heal that, then we have medicine to heal everything that sprouts from it.
Yeah. And that's one important aspect and angle of it. And there's a lot of different angles and aspects of it. They all need to be exposed and explored and talked about, to hopefully for people to come away with an understanding, so that they could help shape the future in a way that's with intent, as opposed to, because I don't want to tell people where this world is going to end up. Whatever happens in this world, it's not for me to say, but what I hope, and this is so key, is that wherever we end up, whether global sea levels rise by an inch or 10 feet in the next 100 years, or whether there's extreme shortages of food and clean water for people to drink, even in first world countries, it's not for me to tell people where we're supposed to end up, but what I hope is that wherever we end up there in that position with intent, not because of ignorance or happenstance or fear, and then we're in a fucking shit show and paying a steep price because no one had their hands on the wheel, or people had their hand on the wheel, but they were fucking idiots being guided by greed and fear,
Right.
and all types of personal issues that have the potential to take society and humanity and all the other life forms on the planet with us, has the potential to send us down a fucking rabbit hole from which we may or may not even be able to return. You're talking about potentially not only mass starvation, and you're talking about the potential for nuclear war, nuclear winter. You're talking about massive climate change, and not the shit we're experiencing now, where the tornadoes are more frequently and the hurricanes and the typhoons on the other part of the world are more intense. You're talking about more serious ramifications that can happen in 50 years or 100 years that will be very difficult to return from. Not impossible, but for some people, impossible because they will be dead. You know, extinction not only of certain species of life on the planet, but just mass casualties, loss of human life as well. So there's real potential for damage if we don't get our shit together and stop focusing on like the immediate short term. And I'm not this hippy dippy kind of, oh well, yeah, we got to focus on, you know, everyone's fair and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, I understand that, you know, people are need to continue on the path they are. You know, there's a capitalist society, and I'm not saying we have to shun it completely. I don't necessarily have a problem with capitalism. Capitalism can work. I have a problem with greed and fear that could turn capitalism into a fucking runaway freight train. And that's, I think, what we're starting to see now. And people have their eye on this really short-term immediate prize without a concern for the price that's going to have to be paid decades down the line, 50 years down the line, 100 years down the line. We are really on the cusp of some pretty serious ramifications. Right. And hopefully enough of us will recognize that. And Neil deGrasse Tyson in Humanity Stoked talks a little bit about that. He said something to me while I was interviewing him, and I was like, oh shit, this is some serious choir preaching, dude, because I've been saying this for years, that I have said this so often. So when Neil said it, I was like, you know, fucking right on, man. I believe so firmly that in a short period of time, people are going to look back on our current generation so embarrassed by how short-sighted we were, how much we let greed and our short-term needs to feel like we're good enough and have enough, that you're going to look back the way we look now on slavery, for example, or before OSHA in the United States, which is a body of government that regulates safety protocols for employees. You know, like when, you know, you could just hire someone and like send them up on some scaffolding without any safety gear and they would drop dead. Or you look back at like the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, where there were no regulations that prevented that they didn't prevent people from burning in a building. There were fire escapes that were required. Doors could not be locked. You know, and it's like, we look back on certain things now when we were like, what the fuck were we thinking of? Like, were we insane? Were we evil? Were we just, what the fuck? And people are going to look back on some of the decisions that we're making now with that same level of shock and
disbelief.
And horror and disbelief at how ignorant we were. So, yeah, hopefully enough people will realize that.
Well, you've caught my interest about your next movie, even though you haven't even started with. I don't think there's a bigger topic to talk about. Like, if you're gonna put years of your life into any topic, might as well be a topic that really helps us all evolve as humanity and saves us from our own demise. That's how I feel about like my paintings. If I'm gonna spend like 6 months painting something, it better be something worth talking about, not just some cool trippy shit that people might like. Well, you also want to make it cool and trippy too.
Well, you do some cool fucking trippy shit. I love your art, man. So there's value in that. Just on that, there is value. I love what you do, man.
But it has to talk about how we're evolving as humanity and how are we producing medicine for the people, for us to become a better version of humanity. And I believe the positive timeline exists, and efforts like your movie and movies will help activate more and more the vibration needed to expand consciousness to the point where it's like, oh shit, we're doing these bad things. Let's stop now and let's move forward and create the world that makes more sense. So thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you.
Woo!
Thank you, man.
I so appreciate you being here in my home.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Real quick, if I can just say one thing, for people, if you do want to support us, and you don't have the means to support the Children's Foundation financially, you could help. It doesn't cost you a dime. Follow Humanity Stoked on social media, and like, share, comment on the post. As we go to distribution, the greater amount of followers we have and the engagement with our fans will help secure the best distribution deal. That means more people can see the film, and it means potentially the more money that's given to us for the film, and that money goes to impact people's lives all around us. So that's how you can help. So thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much for being in the film, being my friend, and for having me in your home.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. We all gotta help each other out. And I hope you guys also enjoyed this interview. Make sure to smash that like button. I hate saying that. Press the like button, comment anything you thought about this interview, share it with whoever think will enjoy this. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and the notification buttons. I don't even know what to ask you here. The point is, please support this project of beautiful conversations I'm having with beautiful people like Michael.
Thank you.
And I'll see you next time. Blessings. Woo!
Next episode, Random Rap.
Finding different ways to tap into different emotions, and I feel like for me it's a way to process grief and joy, and you have this like magic moments and by yourself, and where you're kind of like, it's like a cycle of feeding. What do I want to listen to? I have to create it. I'm feeling better. It's feeling good. And get to this point where I'm really enjoying it, and then I know at this point that if I really love the song, that there's going to be people out there that like it too, and that's just a really incredible feeling.
So please make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Big thanks, and see you next episode. Peace.